Bentornati. Okay, welcome back everyone. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. You're all ready for another edition of our Italian Wine Academy English speaking blind tasting. I'm laughing at Stevie giving me frantic thumbs up. So welcome back everyone on this slightly English evening in Verona with the colder weather and the rain. Maybe it's especially for me because it's comforting. I feel like today we should be drinking a big, bold red together, but instead we're going to taste Garganega. So as usual, the format will be that we will explore the wine using the SAT, the systematic approach to tasting from WSET, using both level 2 and talking about the differences that might occur between level 2 and level 3. Okay, and the aim is to try and understand a little bit about the wine first, to dive into the theoretical angles of the wine, and then see if we can translate that into what's in the glass in front of us. Okay. We had a very interesting and lively discussion at the end of last week's session about whether I had rated the wine too highly, and it made me think about a little motto that I often use when I'm teaching in the classroom, which I don't think I've mentioned yet, because we talk a lot about quality assessment. You know, that is the overall aim of this SAT, is to provide this objective view of the wine through this systematic approach with common vocabulary. Okay. And the reason we do this is because a wine's quality, the conclusions that we draw from it, have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not we like it. Okay, this is the core thing about trying to train your palate as a wine professional. And believe me, I think all of us, no matter how far through our wine life we are, still struggle with this fact. So when I'm teaching, when I'm first doing these introductions to the systematic approach, I say that the one thing you have to remember is that it's not about me, it's about SAT. Okay, and this is going to be your motto whenever you're tasting, whenever you're practicing, because it's about what the SAT, what this systematic approach, what this tasting note tells you in its conclusion. So it just made me think of that last week, and I thought I would mention it to you guys. So this week we're tasting the 2018 Duchess Allegra Garganega. This is not a DOC or DOCG. Okay, often we find Garganega most typically in Soave, but actually this is a Veneto IGT, okay, from Massimago. A little bit of background about this wine before we get tasting. So this is an organic wine. This is something that is particularly beginning to be focused on a little bit more at all levels of the WSET approach, because it is becoming more common. And in particular, for those of you studying level 3, it's really important to put together the fact about the wine with some of the other factors in the vineyard, okay? Because the grapes for this wine are trained on the Veronese pergola, okay? And the training system is particularly important here, okay? Veronese pergola is actually quite a high pergola training system, okay? And those of you who are familiar with the Veneto, as I discovered last year when I moved here, it's incredibly humid, okay? There's a lot of water in the air, and this is terrible potentially for grapes, okay? Because when you have lots of humidity, you can have problems with rot, okay? If you've got water, if you've got dampness sitting on your grapes, particularly later in the season, you know, when you're getting closer to harvesting, then you've got real problems with fungal diseases, okay? So the fact that this is an organic wine makes it even more important to get it off the ground on these pergola structures, away from that humidity that is sitting around the soil, which is, you know, one of the key sources of water, right? So something really interesting to think about. Also, the soils here are limestone, so they don't hold a lot of water. Again, this is really important for this organic production. Limestone tends to be more free draining, for example, than clay. Okay, you would have real difficulties planting in clay here if you didn't have these pergolas, and also if you were trying to aim for this organic production. Okay. So a couple of other things about the wine. 20% of the grapes used in the wine are harvested significantly earlier. Okay, so if we're thinking about this combination between the arc of acidity in a wine and the arc of sugar ripeness, you should know that this means that they're going to have much higher acidity. Okay, so they do this first advance through the vineyard, picking early to have grapes with lots of acidity, and then the other 80% are harvested at peak ripeness. So this is peak sugar ripeness for the amount of alcohol, but also aromatic ripeness, yeah, phenolic ripeness, when you've got this development of flavors at the peak point in the wine. Okay. Then in the winery, as well as being organic, so you're going to see a little bit less sulfur used than normal other approaches in winemaking. Obviously, you get this less in the vineyard. They're also using lees aging. Okay, there's a short period of aging on the fine lees. Okay, and the thing that lees give is a little bit of body, a little bit of texture to the wine. We call it rounding out the mid palate. Okay, so it gives weight, it gives texture, it also gives aromas and flavors. Remember, lees are the dead yeast cells, so it gives aromas and flavors associated with yeast. Yeah, so you're going to get pastry or bread dough or the smell of rising bread quite often. Okay. The other thing that maintaining a wine on the lees helps with is reduction, oxidation. Okay, it helps guard against spoilage in the wine. Okay, so for those of you trying to connect these theoretical points, particularly, for example, for your essays at level 3, but also for level 2, for bringing the roundness of your knowledge together, lees is very important as a tool in organic winemaking. Okay, because you can't use the same amount of sulfur and other chemicals in the wine. You have to use natural factors in order to prevent spoilage. Okay. So it's not uncommon to see this lees aging, particularly in white wines, which may have issues with oxidation, particularly in organic formats. Okay. So that's a little bit about the background. So let's translate that into the glass before we start tasting. So Garganega itself is a grape that tends to have this naturally high acidity anyway. And we're looking for, in terms of aromas and flavors, your classic level 2 tasting note, okay, for those of you reminding yourself of your level 2, is peach, lemon, pear, and apple. Okay, so this combination of those kind of like apple and pear, but with a little bit of stone fruit. Okay. Stepping up to your level 3, where you're probably going to be looking to write more aromas and flavors in your note, you can also begin to think about this steely, mineral, slightly flint character that you can get with Garganega. Okay, so this is all coming from the grape. It also, because of the acidity, because of the ripeness you can get, is a grape that could have potential for aging. Okay, some Soave in particular, in the Classico areas, does have this potential for aging. So we'll be looking for those factors in the wine. In terms of the site, okay, we're looking at these limestone soils, which also not only aid with drainage and are generally good for white grapes in particular. We see it very common to have age-worthy white grapes grown on limestone. It also maintains this acidity. Yeah. And then the human factors, the winery factors, we're going to be looking for the combination of flavors. Yeah, so not only flavors coming from the grape, but flavors coming from the lees. We're also going to be thinking about what the lees would do to the texture, the body of the wine. Okay. So let's get tasting. If you've got your glasses at the ready. I have said before, and I will say again, it's really to your advantage to not taste your white wines too cold. Okay. I normally conduct all of my tastings with my white wines at room temperature. Okay. This is how you would take normally your level 3, level 4 exams, is at room temperature, because remember, cold suppresses flavor. Okay. So in terms of the color, it's a classic WSET CPL, clear pale lemon. No arguments on that. Let's have a smell. So my nose is just on the edge of the glass. It's not quite going into the glass. Yeah, so it's a medium intensity wine. Remember, if you're sticking your nose right in the glass, it's light intensity because you're searching. If you're on that edge point, it's medium. And I would keep this at medium for my level 3. Okay, I'm right bang in the middle of medium intensity. And the thing that sticks out to me immediately is the lees. It's the thing I get first. It's this yeast, this bread dough. And for me, it's particularly very bready in this wine. Some wines tend to express it with a more sweet pastry character. For me, this is more like rising bread dough. For example, rising pizza dough, which I make a lot, something I'm very familiar with. That's something I associate. And that's right in that middle point. If you're struggling to find fruit in the wine, okay, remember I said about moving your nose from here to get the more delicate aromatics in the wine? And yeah, up here, straight away, I get a different set of flavors. So that's where I'm finding the pear, a very, very little bit of peach. It's just coming through, and definitely this kind of lime and steel character. So there's quite a few layers in this wine, but not a lot. Remember, it's a medium intensity. There's some leaves, some pear. The peach is incredibly delicate. Okay. So you've got some primary, and remember, that's coming from the grape, and you've got secondary characteristics. That's coming from the leaves. And in which case, there's no movement towards any tertiary. You wouldn't expect it. It's 2018. But even if you didn't know that, you could tell immediately that this is a youthful wine, yeah, for those of you on your level 3. So let's move on to the palate, and I'm going to do my traditional thing of tasting in blocks, yeah, tasting and really focusing my palate on trying to find those key things in combination. So my first is sweetness and acid. Remember, acid is how much your mouth waters, okay? If you're really struggling with your acid in wines, then take some of the wine in your mouth, hold it for a little bit longer, spit, and then hold your head down and see how much saliva is running through your mouth. It's not pretty, do it over a spittoon if you want to, but it will just help you really identify where that acidity is. So the wine is dry. There's absolutely no sweetness detectable in this wine. I wouldn't expect it to be. I did look at the specs and it's only 1 gram per litre. So really low. And in terms of the acid, for me, if you're doing your level 2, this is medium acid, okay? I am having some watering, but not so much that the saliva is really running through my mouth. If you're tasting with the level 3 spec, medium plus, okay? It's just got that little bit more. Remember, we talk about the level 3 SAT is allowing you to give some more nuance to your tasting note, okay? So medium if you're on level 2, medium plus if you have that option available to you. We're not going to taste for tannin, obviously, because for level 2 and 3, we don't taste for tannin in white wines. So we're going to go straight into alcohol and body. Remember, the alcohol is whether or not you noticed a warmth in your mouth, okay, typically felt in the back of your throat. And the body is how thick, how concentrated, how rich it feels in your mouth. Remember this movement from watery to slightly milky to cream, okay, from lemon juice to orange juice through to mango juice. Okay. No noticeable warmth on this wine at all. This is the textbook definition of a medium alcohol wine. Right slap bang in the middle, and it is 12%, and it's what you'd expect. And in terms of body, remember, we're expecting some body, okay? Despite this acidity, we know that the lees adds body and texture. And we also know that some of these grapes have been picked at that optimal ripeness. So we are expecting there to have been a little bit of sugar that's been turned into alcohol. So yeah, medium bodied on this wine. The lees are really adding that texture, adding that weight, really rounding out the acidity nicely. So I'm going to taste again, and I'm going to do the last three things, okay? Because I find it very, very good to do the flavor, intensity, and the characteristics together, because they're logical. And then when I spit for that last time, I'm really going to think about how long the flavor is lasting. So again, we're right down the middle with medium for the intensity. Okay? Some flavors, but not huge amounts of flavor. Yeah? So medium intensity on both your SAT specs. And this lovely, you lose the intensity of the lees flavor. Okay? For me, the lees are really apparent on the nose, but only come through on the palate really in the texture. Okay, that kind of doughy characteristic, it's there, but it's not very prominent. Instead, I really get a kind of ripe pear, and this is where the peach character comes through. So that very delicate peach that was just detectable on the nose really comes through on the palate. And for me, this is the really great and surprising thing about this wine, is that is sticking around. Okay, I'm talking to you now and I can still taste it. Okay. And remember, when we talk about finish, we are looking for the positive characteristics of the wine, the flavors and aromas, not the structural components. Okay. So you're not looking for, is my mouth still watering from the acid? Do I still feel the alcohol? What you're looking for is, can I still taste the flavors that I was looking for in the wine? And the answer on this one is yes. It has got a long finish. Okay. And it's long for both SATs, yeah? That peach character, when it comes through, although it's delicate, is very persistent. Okay? And again, as you'd expect, primary and secondary characteristics, nothing tertiary. Okay? So what does this mean for the wine in terms of our quality assessment and also for our aging assessment? Remember, we talked at the beginning of the session about the fact that Garganega has this potential for aging, okay? So this is a big question for this wine, is it going to age? So first, let's think about our Blick scale, okay, our guiding tool for how we judge the quality. Is it balanced? Yes, there is absolutely no component out of balance in this wine. Does it have length? Yes, it does, long length. Does it have intensity? Not particularly, okay? So if I was marking this, I would probably give it a minor tick in complexity, half tick as they say, in intensity, and the same in complexity. Okay, we have some levels of aromas and flavors, but not so many and not so easily defined. Okay, so 2 big ticks in balance and intensity, and half ticks in balance and length, and half ticks in intensity and length. Okay? So for me, this fits perfectly into that good bracket, okay? Which is exactly what I would expect from an IGT Verona wine. Very well made, but good. Just picking up a question in the chat. I would not define this as a simple wine, okay? Because with a simple wine, you're really struggling to define the aromas, okay? And you would really be thinking about only having one level of them. Okay. So for example, if the only aromas or flavors I could pick would be generic citrus, okay? And remember, for those of you at level 3, you must name your citrus. So if it was a simple wine, you would be expected to say something like, this is a simple wine with generic aromas of citrus, such as lemon and lime. However, that's not actually the case with this wine. Although it's not very intense, and it doesn't have great complexity, there are 3 or 4 different flavors and aromas going on. We have the pear, we have the stone fruit, we have the lees. Okay? So that's what takes it that step up out of simple wine. Okay? Hope that's helpful. So to go back to thinking about the idea of aging this wine, okay? Remember, the thing we're looking for in aging is whether the wine will improve with time. Yeah? Whether something will be added to this wine, something will be gained from it, something will get better. And in my opinion, that's not the case. Okay? And I think that your tasting note would attest to that. Okay? You're not seeing any development of that tertiary characteristic. And the thing that makes this wine so good on the good scale, the thing that makes it enjoyable, is that light peach character, that slightly mineral character. It's refreshing. If you were to age this wine, you would lose that. Yeah, the refreshing acidity would be reduced. Remember, acid drops as wine ages because of oxidation. Okay? So then you're just left with the body, and also with a little bit of the fruit aroma, which gradually will become flatter. So those of you, I just asked in the chat to see the label. It's this one. I hope that's clear. My arm shaking. So a very, very pretty label. I really like this style. So yes, a good wine, drink now, not suitable for further aging. So if anyone else has any other questions, I hope you've managed to try this wine or one similar to it. It's a nice example of an IGT level Garganega. You know, particularly, I like this wine as a teaching tool because we can talk about what they're doing with lees and the importance of this in terms of organics. Okay? Remember this use of lees as a stabilization process in organic wines. And it does nicely balance out the high acidity. Okay? They've deliberately maintained some of that acidity with the early picking, which is important because otherwise just using the lees to stabilize might give you a wine that's less fresh. So yeah, I think this is a really interesting example and a good teaching wine for the SAT. To answer the questions, no oak used on this wine. It's completely stainless steel. All of that character that you're getting, that kind of creaminess, the extra aromas, flavors, that's all from the lees. Lisa's question about limestone, that's a huge question because soils and wine is incredibly difficult to quantify. However, the general overarching approach is that limestone, I can see you, Lisa, I know we have to generalize, but the idea is that limestone helps aid acidity retention in grapes, can give greater complexity, can allow for greater complexity, and because it's more free draining, it doesn't hold water. This is generally seen as a good thing for grapes. It's also quite compact, so roots have to dig really deep to get through limestone. They have to work quite hard. Okay, so this gives you this concentration. They need to go and find the nutrients further down, and typically we talk about this very broad brush stroke of when a grape is working harder, it tends to be producing better. Okay. Yes, lees is quite commonly used with Garganega generally, not just organic. All of the grape varieties that have this very high acidity can have lees aging, not because it impacts the acidity, okay? Malolactic conversion impacts acidity, but because it gives extra texture in the wine. So when you've got this very high acidity, giving that bit of extra texture can just give you more complexity in the wine, can make it feel more balanced. Okay. In terms of defining it as typical Garganega, I would say it's typical of Garganega IGT, because Garganega is a grape that can show itself very differently with smaller yields, with different production methods. So for this style, yes, but there is some Soave, for example, that will present very differently, particularly those designed for aging. Have I missed anything? Don't think so. Okay, before we go, the wine for next week, we're going to contrast the Garganega Veneto IGT with the DOC next door in Valpolicella. Okay. another organic, and another young wine. So will be quite interesting to see, and again, talk about aging capacity, production method, etc., etc. I hope that was useful. I hope to see you all next week. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Enjoy your wine. Thanks, guys.